Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Dev Weekly. It is episode 37, unless I'm completely mistaken. I just threw something in here. And it is 29th of April 2019. And this time, together with me and Waldek, we do have a visitor, Andrew K. So Andrew, will you do the quick intros, who you are and what you've done as a background info?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for having me in the show. My name is Andrew Koltyakov. I'm a SharePoint developer and co-founder of Arvo Systems. We are a small company dealing mostly with SharePoint custom development for around 70 years up till now. Yeah. We're located in St. Petersburg, Russia. It's not far from Finland.
That is true.
Yeah.
I was just thinking this earlier today. It's like, what is it, 250 miles?
Yeah, it's
miles
like 6 hours on a bus, and I'm can be very close to you
yep.
in terms of distance. Yeah, I would love considering our company as an international one, at least in terms of mindset and customers-wise. Our customers are divided to local Russian and English-speaking, approximately as 50-50. Sometimes I want to name us as a come and save a day company, as there are so many cases there we got to continue a project after previously almost failed SharePoint implementation. My usual area of convenience is JavaScript. Not only on the client, but also on server side. However, I studied with the front end back in days. Then the love to JavaScript converted to TypeScript and was extended drastically with Node.js adoption. And Node.js currently is widely used for different production purposes on our projects. Since 2017, I've been honored as a Microsoft MVP in Office Apps and Services category, and it was a result of being pretty active in open source community, and many might know me as a guy helping folks with PNP.js. And if you're dealing with the SharePoint client side and REST API and do not use PNP.js for some reasons, yet stop doing it and let it go because it's really a time saver, and you just feel when you're applying this library to the project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks to this dedication for PNP.js client-side libraries back in days, I was invited to join PNP core team, and thank you guys for seeing this work. I would love thinking that some of my work in open source field helps other developers be more productive with SharePoint development, be more modern, and even if a developer starts with legacy SharePoint like on-prem 2013, within my projects on GitHub, there are many which aimed to SharePoint automation with Node.js, and not only for build and pipeline tools, but also such as local dev service with proxy into SharePoint APIs. And the last one, the library named SP REST proxy, gained it success due to the fact that it allows setting up the development tool chain for old versions of SharePoint, but dealing with it in a modern way. So it's possible to boost Webpack dev server, target to SharePoint API using proxy, and start developing a single page application, even if it's SharePoint 2013. Yeah. So that's my background in a nutshell.
Yep, and coming back on what you were just saying, that there's a lot of tools which you develop, and we'll have a look on some of them in the later this call, which definitely helps on modernizing the development for on-premises as well, and that absolutely gains. Yes, well, I think they're getting quite a lot of usage as well. So, and PMP.js, no doubt, is getting enormous amount of usage also apparently in on-premises environments, because you can use that in on-prem in certain level.
35K installations each month. And around 3 billion requests in SharePoint Online.
That is a lot. Considering also that it's relatively new library still, comparing some of the older things. Well, everything depends what is new and what's old, and everything is relative. But that's the thing what I was actually doing at the same time when we were talking. I'll open up a tab in the screen for showing what is a PMP.js, just in case for those who are not aware. So let's have a talk on that one as well. Now, thank you, Andrew, for that one. Like I said, it's well, to be honest, for me, it's a lack of my, I don't know what it is. How do I call it myself? I should have actually visited St. Petersburg a while back already, but I haven't. So I've been in Moscow, and back in 2001, we did a awesome train ride from Helsinki to Moscow to Ulaanbaatar, stayed in Mongolia, and then China. So and that was absolutely brilliant. So you can actually see throughout Russia. It's beauty and not that beauty parts, but you can actually see the different sides of Russia, which is interesting.
Yeah, there are absolutely different parts.
Yes, absolutely. But everything is evolving. That's already almost 20 years ago, which is horrifying, by the way. It's 18 years from that trip. Time flies.
Oh, well.
Anyway. So Waldek, let's get back to you for a second. So what have you been up to during this week?
You mean the last week, right? This week is just like, this week is like,
It was enough time to...
Yes. It's Monday, 2 p.m.?
Yeah, so this week, I did a few things, but not much. Last week we've done one of the updates of one of the tools that we have at Rancor, which is the health check, which allows you to quickly have a look at your environment, either on-prem or online, and see, is there anything wrong that requires my immediate attention? And we added like two big things. One is the fact that we're looking now also in things like flows and power apps, and the other one is that we're not only looking into things like showing you issues, but also tell you where the issues are, so that you can or you will have evidence saying like, no, these guys are not making things up. There is an evidence like you can look there by yourself. So there was one, two. We had new version of the CLI with updates for enabling the com site or enabling com site features on the root site, as it's called, right? If you really want to be strict, like what's going on behind the scene, and some fixes as well. And at the same time, we're going through a refactoring where we want to simplify the login, because currently we have in CLI, you log in separately to SPO, to AAD, to Graph, and it sounded like a good idea at first, but over time, it seems like, well, why not just allow people to sign in once and then use or leverage the fact that in AAD you have MRRs, you have the multi-resource refresh tokens, and then just swap request tokens on demand without bothering the user or even the devs who build the commands, right? Because if you build a command now, you no longer need to worry about, do I need to request a token for this versus for this? I need to sign into the admin side or regular side. So all of that will be gone in V2. You will sign in once, and then you will be good to go to connect with whatever we allow you to and whatever you can. Yes.
Now a question on that one. So is it now based on-demand permission granting, or are you granting a lot of permissions on the initial request?
So currently we support the AAD view 1, which is everything is requested upfront. Yep. You have the ability to bring your own AAD app. So if you don't want to use ours, or you want to use it, for example, in app only, you can define your own app and you can bring that to use that with CLI.
So basically, just to clarify that as well, because you mentioned that MRRT. But basically what happens there is that when you're signing in, you're getting a prompt for granting the big set of permissions, which are across different resources. So SharePoint, and
Flow,
Teams,
graph,
and Flow,
emails,
and all
yes,
of that.
everything.
But whenever you're requesting an access token, it only works towards one resource. But
Yes.
As long as you have been granted for all of the other resources, you're able to actually do an HTTP dumps together with Azure AD and get an access token transformed to another resource as long as that was granted before.
Yes.
That's what basically is happening behind the scenes.
Yes, exactly. And then, so at some point, we even looked into, can we switch already to MSAL and the AAD v2? And it turns out we can't, because device code auth or device code flow is not supported yet in MSAL.
Okay.
So we cannot switch to MSAL until it's there.
And the device thing is needed because when you're signing in, it actually is using the device-based authentication, which is basically then prompted on behalf of the user as a device.
Yes.
So the CLI is kind of acting as a device.
Yeah, because it is a command line tool, so we cannot show a pop-up in browser, right? Because it's a command line tool. And also with the fact, like, one idea that we had, it's still something that we want to try at some point, is and the same idea is being used with the Azure CLI when you launch it directly in Portal. So in Portal, when you go to portal.azure.com, you can start their inline command prompt with either the Azure PowerShell or CLI. And if I'm not mistaken, the way it works, when you start CLI, it starts container that Azure hosts for you, and then there's socket open between UI in browser and container and sends back and forth the output. Well, at that point, you can imagine that if CLI would run in container, well, it cannot start a pop-up.
Yep.
So it will use device code auth because it's just text that you can then open on your phone, authenticate there, and then it would just plug back. But so that's something that we're gonna try as well. Like, could we have an SPFX web part with CLI in it that you would put on a page and would then communicate to somewhere and would allow you to manage your tenant in browser?
Kind of interesting, yeah. Why not actually? Of course you can. So but because you don't actually, why not actually?
And then imagine that at that stage, we could combine it with the experience of being able to extend the admin experiences in 365 and then integrate it there.
True.
And then you have scriptable console directly in browser.
Yeah.
How cool would that be?
Like within the portal, Azure portal already
exactly.
right now. But
exactly. Yes.
Absolutely makes sense. That's pretty cool. On my side, keep quickly kind of doing a quick round of things. What have I done? We are looking into open sourcing the provisioning service, which is an interesting thing. Crossing fingers, we can announce that in SBC. It is actually progressing. It's a interesting. So obviously, I'm a dev by a heart, but now I've been forced to give up too much time or a lot of time away. Well, no, actually, I would love to write stuff, but it's like
given opportunity.
Fine, but the things are not moving unless there's somebody who's coordinating all of this non-dev stuff as well, which is now falling more and more on my table. But having those discussions with legal, everything else, dealing with the open sourcing stuff is interesting. Let's put it this way, in a polite way. We've been testing 1.8.2 of SharePoint framework. That's coming out relatively soon. So 1.8.2 will have support for Node 10. And finally, and a few other things. Technically, the Node 10 has worked for a while already together with SharePoint Framework, but now we're kind of announcing the official support and then a few other version improvements. Testing that has taken quite a lot of time. And then, getting ready for build, getting ready for SBC, getting ready for ECS. and
Vacation.
Yeah. I just had a discussion with my wife, who's working remotely as well at home today, a few days a week, and that so there wasn't again a request to me to fly to Redmond for early June. And it's like no. I'm already 3 weeks away in May, so I wasn't actually even planning to go. But it's good to have the discussion and transparent discussions on the things. But there would be so much to do, so it's just mind blowing. Anyway, let's actually go to the screen and let's have a look on some of the, Andrew, what you've done in the GitHub and what are the assets which are available for people to take advantage. And then let's talk about the other articles. So let's actually do that. So let me share my screen, and it is this screen in here. And tell me when you can actually see what I'm sharing.
Yes, it's there.
We can see.
That was fast. Cool. So first of all, Chicago suburbs, SharePoint Saturday coming up on this Saturday, so 4th of May. There is apparently a Chicago SharePoint Saturday and then Chicago suburbs. I'm not quite familiar how this works, but hey, that's good if there's enough people joining on these things. And there's a nice list of speakers and sessions available on next Saturday in the SharePoint Saturday. So good set of people and speakers available. Now, we typically have this one always as a first start, but let's actually then go to Andrew's stuff. So this one was something which we talked before we started recording. Can you explain what this one was all about? So SharePoint HTTP client for Go and Golang.
Yeah, so there are little options for Go language to deal with SharePoint API, because it's not straightforward task to authenticate any language which is not supposed initially to work with a specific platform. And Gossip library adds capabilities for authenticating to SharePoint, and it covers many possible ways of authenticating to SharePoint, because there are a lot of different OAuth strategies in
Sure.
Yeah, so it can be even different strategies when you deal with online, and when you add on-premises, which is usually one of the possible options on my projects. It becomes a real disaster to switch from one authentication to another. And as we have in our Node.js community, we have a nice library, Node SPOs, which manages all that authentication strategies. And I had a project with a Go language together with SharePoint. I decided to recreate almost all of the authentication strategies for Go language. And now if you need to create a program or a script in Golang, which should communicate with SharePoint, you don't need to go through all these steps of you don't even need to understand how authentication works, just to know what kind of strategy to use. And if to scroll a little bit to the any sample so it's just a couple of import statements, and understanding which strategy is used, providing authentication parameters, and then you have the pretty standard HTTP client, and any Go developer can pick and use the library.
Yeah. So the one thing I wanted to ask is that you mentioned that you're doing Go and you've done Node. Like typically we would hear that whenever you do SPDev, you would do it in .NET and C#. Like what were the reasons behind doing Node or Go with SPDev?
It's everything about the options, and if a developer can do something, nothing actually can stop but the time, workload, budget, and so on. And when we switched a lot of backend tasks to Node.js ecosystem, we got the idea in mind that we can reuse part of the logic client side and on the service side, and use JavaScript, TypeScript of course, but anyway on both ends. And then such infrastructural things came like Azure functions. Then you can create a function in JavaScript and place it to the backend. This was the main idea, to unify the languages that you use on different sites. And even more, a lot of even scripting for admin purposes also were created as a scripts for Node.js, and You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
After creating the CLI.
CLI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a reason for that was different, and like back in the days when I started doing the first work on that, it was primarily meant for non-Windows OSs, and there was at that point zero support for it.
I think the number one scenario for that one was that we actually promoted Office 365 CDN, and then Waldek said, "Well,
I was like, I'm on a Mac, I cannot enable it."
Exactly.
Yeah, there is no button in UI.
Install a PowerShell. Yeah, but I can't. I'm on a Mac. Well, okay then.
Yeah, and then get a VM for that. Like, no.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, basically it was to scratch my own itch, and now like you see more and more folks, and I guess I absolutely buy into the idea that it's so much easier to just use one language back and front end. Like, why use C# for this and Go for that and Ruby for like? Why do everything just in single language and then use that back and forth, right? And then especially for things like long running operations or even scripts, right? You can automate all of that in one unanimous way and then reuse across the board.
Only if we have the needed libraries, and basically that's what Andrew is
auth
helping
is
to make
always
happen.
The first
And
step. Auth is always the first step, right? Because you cannot do anything unless you auth.
Yeah. Now, just out of curiosity, Andrew, on the list of these tools which we're seeing on the screen as well, the SP REST proxy, you mentioned this one on the discussion as well, and this one seems to be relatively popular with 91 stars and all of that. So. What was this all about? So this is not a super old thing, but relatively new, but it is solving a scenario as well, right?
Yeah, when it comes to modern front-end development, most of the community members get used to start a local dev server, like running npm run start dev or whatever the npm task is named. And dev server is something locally hosted. Usually it's a dev webpack dev server, which is or Express server, whatever. It can be any other tool. And the main pain is that you need to communicate with SharePoint, but you started something locally. And this was initially just like a crazy idea that we can start another server in Node.js, pre-authenticated with a specific user account and targeted to a specific SharePoint environment. And after that, after initial creation of the library, we even didn't use it for a while until folks in GitHub came and said it's a cool tool and we're using it, and it saved us a lot of hours just to reducing the gap between when you apply any change in your project and see result on the actual page. And with these tool chains, this gap is almost minimal. So it usually takes a couple of milliseconds for Webpack to rebuild the project if it's already loaded to memory, and then the hot reload, you're receiving the updated picture, and the application can authenticate and go to receive actual data from SharePoint, and you don't need to mock up all the data because in many situations it can be complicated task to mock up everything, because SharePoint API is huge. It provides a lot of capabilities. That's why this library was created.
Yeah, really cool, and it's quite widely used still right now, right? So.
Yes, and we started using it on our projects more and more, and it's usually pre-modern SharePoint projects when you got to deal with on premises. And if it were a SPFX project, this library is not so relevant, because you can start Workbench in no browser mode, place the web part to SharePoint page, add the URL to the end, debug as usual. without hot reload in some situations. But anyway, you're pretty quick in this terms with the SharePoint framework. But when it comes to legacy, old versions, legacy SharePoint, but with which we got to deal because customers use on premises, especially here. A lot of our customers just can't migrate to the cloud. Have intentions, but enterprise. Yeah, and so it's kind of alternative when you deal with on-premises.
Yep. Absolutely. Now, on the tools which you've been involved, Andrew, BMP.js is something of us which we've been now executing for 3 years. 3 years, actually, slightly more than 3 years, because we started the BMP.js actually started as a it had a hidden agenda which we were not open, because BMP.js actually started before SharePoint framework was even announced. But me, Patrick, and a few others knew that we're going to announce SharePoint framework and the modern development stack and everything else. So we started this BMP.js core first, and then started meeting bi-weekly, and then community, and then having a discussion, and then that was renamed to be BMP.js and relocated slightly on a GitHub and all of that. But you've been active on this one, Andrew, right? Or almost from a start, or how was it?
Yes. So it was, I guess, it was 2015 when BMP.js started being used in our team, and at that time there were a lot of gaps in the library in terms of methods coverage, and it was a usual situation that basic scenarios works, but when you extend your application with some new functionality, you faced the fact that something was missed, but the idea of the library was really great, and we decided, and I personally decided, why not to contribute to this nice project and extend it. And somehow it happens that I found myself more and more answering on GitHub issues related to the library. I don't even know how it happened, but it happened. And for myself, it was also really beneficial, because a lot of questions required to dig a little bit in the specific aspects of the REST API, how it works, and after a while this became even more beneficial, because the same exactly questions arise from time to time in our team, and the answer was really quick. Just search through the issues and you'll find the previously answered in question.
Just for those who might not be super familiar how this actually works, let me flip the color to yellow. So what we're actually doing here is that we're kind of making the calls from an SP web lists get list by a title, and then you provide the string on the as the title name, and then from there we're selecting title and author and getting top 50 of them. So it's a fluent API on top of the SharePoint REST API. So you don't have to understand the SharePoint REST URL syntax. That's what BMP.js is. Plus, it has the intelligence. So when you're writing, let's say if we can actually pull this off. So when you're writing, you actually get the intelligence. So it gives you all the time the different options, what you can actually do and whatnot. And the REST API doesn't do that. So it increases the productivity of the developer by abstracting the REST API URL syntax.
Yeah,
would that be the right way of putting that? Yeah. I
also experimented with giving the library for newcomers and a new developer not very familiar with SharePoint who receive the import statement for PNPGS and started dealing with some specific task, was managed to achieve the task rather in times quicker than if they don't have the library. And after a while, sometimes some person even think that PNPGS and REST API is the same exactly things, that it's a part of SharePoint, but actually it's a community library.
Yeah. Well, kind of it's fun, but not really. But yeah, that's right. But it's nice to see the interest and a growing interest on this one. Absolutely, the BMPJS library is just brilliant example of the power of the community on building something together. And it has 225 stars and 97 forks, so it's growing all the time. The usage is growing, which is brilliant as well.
And when we got to switch from one repository to another due to the structural changes in the library and naming changes, the previous version, the previous repository of PNPGS on GitHub, SharePoint, SP, PNPGS has even more stars because it was started before, and many of the folks who start the previous library just forget to start the new one.
True. But yeah, so it's the usage is growing. Now I'm conscious about the time because we do have a debt. We do have a debt. That doesn't mean a thing. That was English.
Nobody is dead yet. No, nobody is dead yet.
So because we have a hard stop, that was what I was meant to say in 9 minutes. So, but I wanted to quickly go through on the additional articles. First of all, there's some news related on SharePoint news from Chris McNulty from our marketing related on upcoming capabilities. And stuff is now again rolling out gradually. So we talked about the audience targeting, I think, already last Ignite. So we're kind of now spilling the beans for all of the things until we start announcing new stuff in the upcoming SPC. That's basically what's happening now. Audience targeting is coming out, so we're able to target in the news level. So what is the visibility of the news? So that's getting rolled out. Super cool capability. Definitely something which has been missing in here. What's really the important thing in here is that you can target actually based on many groups. So not just based on the classic audiences, which by the way does not work properly in SharePoint Online due to various reasons, and we don't need to deep dive on that one. And it's a legacy implementation versus Azure AD. Also, you can actually get emails on the comments and replies and likes. To be fair, I don't like this because I hate email, but that's a separate discussion. But at least it lets people know that somebody has commented your article, which is kind of cool as well. Organizational assets. There are CSAM and PowerShell signs on this one already. All of those are not yet enabled in all of the tenants, but basically what you can do is that you're able to define an asset library in the organization level. Let me actually flip the color. Organization level. So that then is visible in the asset pickers. So this way you have a centralized location for logos and images and all of that, which is pretty cool. Sorry, that was... No, never mind. Background noise.
the coffee.
Yes. Call for action links in the Hero web part. So additional things, additional capabilities coming here as well. So you're able to say this additional actionable things in the Hero web part as well, and new stuff getting announced in SPC, which is in less than 1 month, actually, which is really cool. Now, moving on other things, David Ramalho is always providing nice scripts related on how to enable certain things, and this one was around check external sharing in Office 365. So basically a script and PowerShell script. I think it's using PMP. No, this is using SPO, PowerShell. And it's double checking the external sharing settings, and then you're able to run through that into your tenant, so you'll know what of the things are enabled externally and what's not. And sure enough, maybe we should have a centralized report like this by Microsoft as well, but hey, PowerShell, you can easily get that information as well. This one was from Sebastian Levert and video. So he's having this video series called Office 365 Sparks. So how to search for your hub site data using SharePoint Search API, and really nice video on explaining how that can be done. Also links related on the topics which were actually mentioned on the video as well. But good stuff from Sebastian. Please have a look on that. Now here, SPFX calendar web part. So really cool web part from Xiao Mendes. I think this is actually contributed already on the SPFX web parts in a GitHub as well. So really, really cool stuff. So rendering a calendar data in a web part format, so you can put it on a modern page, which is really cool. And you are able to define the site URL and the calendar list name. So it's basically drawing the calendar based on a location which you define. And I think that's really, really cool.
Does it show recurrent events?
That's a good question. That is a good question.
It's complicated.
But
there's no such thing as recurring events.
There is no such thing as recurring there. Fair question, though. I think that's a classic request on the API to actually have. But
to expose them first, yeah.
Yes.
And using render list data stream, it's possible to get recurrent events, but it's also not very straightforward and easy to rewrite in the standard.
That's actually a good point. That's a good hint. Maybe somebody should write an example how to make that happen.
There is an example in PGS issues.
Oh, good point. Good point. So it is actually recorded. Now, Wartaman released just earlier today. It is 29th of April, using Microsoft Rush to manage SPFX projects with library components. So basically, the Microsoft Rush is a library which we developed as a Microsoft to manage large solution structures. So our SP client, which is our main solution, which is the Yeoman generator and all of our libraries and applications and web parts and everything else, is a multi-solution structure. And just doing the classic development experience on top of that was not possible. So what we then developed, or Pete Gonzalez developed, I think Pete was the main lead on this one, is the Rush.js, which is basically then giving us this kind of a more centralized way of developing stuff. And this is fully open source, available for anybody also outside of SPFX, which is highly useful scenario. SharePoint Framework Group People web part. This one is from Laurent Sittler. So basically, I think it's actually showing groups and people. Yes.
And actually, cool thing is if you go here, it's like, wait a minute, we are there.
Yes. How did you end up? No, never. But basically showing the list of people in a group and then rendering that. And this is actually quite, that is actually, I didn't actually even notice that, but that's
if you go all the way up, the image has exactly the same thing.
Yeah. But basically what you can say that it's, you can select a group and then it shows the list of people who belong to the group. And I think this is actually quite often useful. So people need to have this kind of widgets within their intranet. So absolutely.
Yeah. Then especially if you create a group enabled site, then well, at some point you might want to show who are the members, so that if you not being the member arrive on a site, you know, like whose site, who's working there, and so forth and so on, which is like really frequent requirement in projects.
Yep, absolutely. And then now the last article here was from David. He actually released this on 19th of April, but we didn't have this one in the last time in the weekly. It is a nice video around the SharePoint library components. He actually did a similar demo or similar coverage on the last community call as well, but really good coverage on what is a library component, what does it actually mean, how you do the development, and the considerations on that. Library component is still in preview, but plan to go GA as part of the SharePoint Framework 1.9 release, which will hopefully happen in May, but no promises at this point yet. We're looking into, by the way, what's kind of interesting final note, because there is a hard stop. I'm going to stop this one. We're potentially looking into moving a monthly release cycle with SPFX, which probably I haven't even told publicly yet, except right now.
You heard it first.
You heard it first. But obviously, we're highly interested on getting feedback on that one as well. So that would give us then a more structured way for releasing. And if something isn't ready, then it's going to be just delayed for 1 month, and then it goes live on the next month, rather than having kind of an unknown time zones and time frame for the releases. But there's so many things on the backlog that we would like to have this cycle or engine releasing stuff all the time, which makes a lot of sense actually. So, but good. Any last words for either one of you? We're hitting the hour, so everybody has a meeting waiting up. Another week. I'm heading to Build next week, so we need to figure out how do we do the recording with Waldek still for that one.
On Friday, right?
On Friday. I think we're doing that on Friday. Yeah.
It's planned already. Okay. Taken care of.
But thank you, Andrew, for joining on this one. So thank you and clarifying a lot of your or showing your tooling and clarifying what's available. I think highly beneficial stuff for other people to take advantage. And thank you, Waldek, for joining as well. Any last words? Any last words?
See ya.
That's fair as well. Thank you, Andrew, and let's stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.